Hello, guys and girls. The program you are about to hear will be both fun and educational, but it is not a substitute for medical advice. Although we are doctors, we are not your doctors. Hello, and welcome to Travel Medicine. As always, I'm your friendly neighborhood internal medicine doc, Dr. J.
Yeah. Dr. Santhosh, pediatrician, researcher. You got the deal. Josh, the Karate Kid or Cobra Kai.
Okay.
Okay, I can't stop being angry at the LaRussos. This is like just... They're not the heroes. They should never be the heroes. And I'm so angry. You remember how you went through another show with me and you were so angry about the show and everything?
Oh,
This
Wheel
is
of Time,
like
yeah. Furious.
Yeah,
Rage.
absolutely. Although this one is not about the quality of the show and everything. They're getting everything right. Yeah.
Hold your horses. Let's catch the audience up real quick, I promise.
Okay.
Then we'll get back
listen.
into it.
All right, fine. Okay, I'm sorry. This is Dr. Santhosh. I'm your pediatric infectious disease and researcher, and I've got something on my mind.
Out in the podcast sphere, it's a digital bird. It's a Minecraft plane. I don't know what the equivalent is, but it is time for our 8th annual venture to San Diego Comic-Con, and you know what that means. It's time for another year of comic book medicine. Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah. Welcome all you folks who've been with us for all these years, and welcome new people who are about to get a taste of some of the coolest merging of pop culture and medical science ever, bar none. I'm standing by that.
When we end a season, we go out with a bang. And once again, we're going to tackle a number of medical issues that come up in pop culture, comics, television, and the like, and see what things are possible and what real-world things they address. So,
like in the real world,
in the
Johnny
valley
was the Karate Kid. Johnny was the real Karate Kid. There, okay. I'm sorry.
I grew up in the valley in the 80s. There was nowhere near the amount of karate used for conflict resolution as is implied by the show.
I honestly do love it, all in all. And it kind of... Cobra Kai, by the way, is the show I'm talking about, guys. And
Let's move on to one of our comic book ventures. I'm going to jump around a little. After all, there's a whole bunch of different worlds where other things made you angry, or you didn't care about this, or I didn't care about it. And we're talking about a whole multiverse.
Marvel, the cinematic universe has absolutely exploded, where you now have essentially unending possibilities. There's a universe of paint, Josh.
Rather than talk about multiverse of madness, or at least the main characters in it, Doctor Strange himself, I want to mention a cameo. Everyone's favorite man with multiverse experience, of course, Bruce Campbell.
Oh, absolutely love Bruce Campbell. If you guys... Well, there are those of us, Josh, and you've introduced me to this a little bit, all the way old school, like Ash and the Evil Dead, where Bruce Campbell played the central character. But Bruce Campbell, if you look through movies, he's been in absolutely everything. And going back to the beginning of Marvel, he announced the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man to the wrestling ring. The Amazing Spider-Man, like that one.
In this one, he has a brief negative interaction with Doctor Strange that leaves him beating himself up over it.
Yeah. Doctor Strange put a spell, I guess, on his hands where he had to keep punching himself?
Well, on only one hand, it would appear, right?
Oh, yes,
because he wasn't, because one other hand was trying to hold it off. So there's two things I want to reference. One is that's a fantastic reference to Army of Darkness, where Ash was also beating himself up. So for any of you who have seen both of those, fun little nod. But more importantly, There's a real medical condition that is similar to that, not wizard curse, but
Yeah. Okay. Well, so where basically your hand does whatever it wants, independent of what you'd like it to do, that kind of thing. Is it a spasm or a?
alien hand syndrome is
Oh
not
yeah.
alien from outer space, but alien as in foreign to you.
Right. Correct.
Is characterized by involuntary movements of a limb, which usually is the hand, that seem purposeful or functional. And people who have this may also feel that the limb is not part of their body, which is different than a phantom limb, because that's, of course, still having a sensation of a hand that is yours but not present. Whereas this one, they look right at the hand and say, this doesn't belong to me. It's somebody else's hand.
Right. And so I think the specific thing that you were putting in there was purposeful. So there are focal seizures that you can have in a hand or a foot or something like that, where you still feel like, oh, that's my hand, but it's spasming. Or likewise, you can have a musculoskeletal, condition where the arm or the hand will seize or spasm, not from the central nervous system, but also from peripheral nerves. And then, of course, you can have, severing the nerves, or at some point where the hand can contract or kind of curl up. But Josh, you're talking about actually like maybe picking up a pen and writing or something, or like complex purposeful movement.
It can do a whole bunch of things, Santosh. It has been seen to hold an object, reach out and grab things, almost as if, let's say, you're trying to walk towards the exit, and all of a sudden your hand reaches out and grabs a knob or a cabinet.
Oh, okay.
Now, not quite as crazy as like your whole arm shoots out, but if it happens to be by like kind of spasms, spasms like that. And as also seen in the movie Dr. Strangelove, I don't know if you recall that one, he had his alien hand syndrome. And there have been reports of people of this syndrome either hitting or attempting to choke themselves, as was seen by Ash. Now,
gotcha.
Common causes of alien hand syndrome, at least in the literature, include strokes, brain tumors, and neurodegenerative illnesses like Parkinson's, occasionally Alzheimer's, but really more of the rarer ones. Because as I said, this is not something you see with any kind of regularity. Usually what you see is something we call neglect.
Neglect, not I've left this thing alone, but literally unawareness of one part of the world. And this isn't just like visual blindness or that kind of a thing. Literally, to these people, it's as if, and oftentimes left-sided neglect is one of the more common, that half of the world, as far as how the brain processes it, visually, spatially, all this kind of a thing, it does not exist. As for instance, Josh, if you ask them to draw a clock, right, they might draw the circle, but they'll crowd all of the numbers to one side of the clock, one hemisphere of the clock.
Yeah, it'll only be a semicircle.
Yeah, just like that. Just
like in Moon Knight.
Just like in Moon Knight. Exactly right. There is one other kind of cool situation where this can happen, Josh, and that is when either purposefully or surgically you actually perform a severing of the corpus callosum, that big fibrous interconnection where all the nerves between our two hemispheres run, right? So this is some weird stuff. So, for instance, there was a split-brained person, we call him split-brain, where he sometimes pulled his pants up with one hand and down with the other because one side of his body was like, I'd like to get dressed, and the other one's like, oh, no, I don't want to get dressed. The sides of your body literally split up.
So alien hand syndrome is an actual disorder that you can see and not just a result of angering wizards in the Marvel universe.
Yeah, absolutely. Although I wonder if Doctor Strange knew that and he was the one who actually invented that spell. because he was like, "Oh, this would be a cool one to do."
Oh, that's true. He was you know what? He was a neurosurgeon.
He was a neurosurgeon, so his spell could have actually, caused a severing of the corpus callosum, or any other type of focal neural degeneration that was temporary with his magic.
Can you imagine he's operating on a brain tumor and thinking to himself, "Ooh, this would make such a good hex."
Exactly right. Yeah. I wouldn't be
and
surprised.
That's what he did.
Like
that's what he did to Pizza Papa. He just gave him some neurodegenerative illness. Well,
yeah.
if you find yourself so cursed,
you could always see him like instantly going like, "Oh, all right, I just need the medial aspect of the frontal lobe," and bam. Yeah.
And the timeline is consistent with what we saw, where it could last, several weeks to perhaps months later. Treatments may involve Botox injections, which can temporarily weaken the muscles, kind of prevents them from performing those alien actions.
Yeah.
Cognitive behavioral therapy to, reintroduce yourself to your hand.
Yeah. And it sounds really weird, but you're kind of convincing yourself that that's your hand with outside help. And then when it does the right behavior, you actually reward yourself. I know that sounds super weird, but it works.
And or distracting the affected hand by having it hold an object or be involved in a task with, say, like a fidget spinner.
Oh my God. That's going to be my excuse from now on when I'm just walking around with a fidget spinner.
Okay, but then if you put your fidget spinner down, you have to punch yourself in the head to convince people. So think carefully before you want to commit to that. It's a lot to take on.
See, this is why you're my friend. You're always thinking ahead.
Let's move on to another corner of the Marvel Universe. Okay. Our next one involves two different characters, Captain Mar-vell, and maybe we can talk about the Thor movie as well. So Captain Mar-vell, not Ms. Marvel, the new show with Kamala Khan. Yeah, if you enjoyed Spider-Man Homecoming, great. Same exact aesthetic, but totally different story.
Yeah, very, very cute, teenagery, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Nor am I talking about Carol Danvers or the Marvel Corps. I'm talking about the person who gave her those abilities in the comics, Captain Mar-vell. Mar-vell himself, pretty interesting. He was one of the Marvel equivalents to Superman, hence the name Captain Mar-vell. And there's a fascinating story because there are characters with that name in both the Marvel and DC universe, and ooh, the fights they had.
Did they do crossovers?
No, they had legal fights over who could use that name.
Oh, got it.
And I can't say who won or lost, but Shazam!
Got it.
So, being a cosmic hero, Mar-vell, the Kree hero, found himself face to face with a lot of different foes and locations throughout the universe, and this actually ended up with him getting cancer after being exposed to Compounds 13 nerve gas.
Oh, that sounds creepy.
Now, there is no real-world equivalent for this that we know of, I hope. It had, however, a carcinogenic component that his negabands, the Kree negabands, would not allow to be treated while the bands were on. So that's kind of how he shifted, almost like clicking his heels together 3 times. If the bands were off, he returned to either his normal self without powers, or he could switch places in the universe with Rick Jones, who also hung out with the Hulk.
Oh, okay, gotcha. So they were kind of instant mind sharing or jumping kind of
they
thing?
were power band. Just think of it as he put them on and he got his powers. But
you got power on. Okay, got it. Okay, but so once the negabands were on, he couldn't what now?
Well, here's part of the he could still do all his powers, but he couldn't be treated for this cancer, despite saving his life at the time. So it stopped Compound 13 from killing him on the spot, but it triggered a mutation in the disease, causing it to be immune to photonic energies, which is Captain Marvel's power set.
Okay, well, this definitely has real life equivalents because cancers over the time, even while you're trying to treat it, they do mutate and become resistant to chemotherapy, and there are some radio resistant cancers as well that develop over time.
So they actually made this a whole comic event, the death of Captain Marvel. Spoilers. The scientific superhero community all came together, and you would think that literally the greatest minds in the Marvel Universe could slow it down, but they still couldn't cure it. So,
just real quick for those who don't know, so scientific community in the Marvel Universe, Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, Tony Stark, Iron Man, all the super smart folks, and all together in one room trying to solve problems, usually creating more problems.
With the bands, essentially all known cancer treatments would stop working, because if he removed the bands, it would allow the cancer to advance much faster and kill him within hours, which meant he had to keep the bands on. But with the bands on, he was immune to all cancer treatments.
Oh, that makes sense, because he would be resistant against radiation, so thus the cancer is resistant to radiation. He can't be poisoned, and that's what chemotherapy is. I wonder if this was written in a more modern context, now that we have actual targeted monoclonal antibodies and stuff, that it still would have been resistant. That would be an interesting twist on there. That you could bypass it that way.
Because this is a comic book universe, you also have to wonder if this is implying a sentient cancer, since most cancers, when in remission, such as they would be kind of with the negabands, they're held at bay. Most of them don't come back at unprecedented levels overnight. You don't really see that, where a cancer that's been in remission all of a sudden one night, the next day, instantly, is... except some of the leukemias with blast crises.
That's absolutely true. That they can sit dormant for a while and then all of a sudden have a really rapid course. But that, generally speaking, it's not because they've been suppressed by themselves. It's because you get a sudden mutation that allows for a blast crisis to go about.
From perhaps a compounds 13. So my theory is that he had some kind of sentient leukemia.
Okay, that's a decent possibility. Yeah, absolutely. In the Marvel Universe, yeah.
They never actually go into it. He just has non-specific cancer, but Captain Marvel does in fact die surrounded by his heroes and his friends in the Marvel Universe. And there are some, they're standing guard because when a good time to attack is, although they don't address it in the comic, when a bunch of superheroes are either surrounding the bed of their friend or to try and attack that person in case their friends aren't guarding him.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man. Even in death, they can't get a break. Poor dudes.
That's the happy ending.
Oh, well, I suppose so.
Well, because we're still talking multiverse, right? In a different storyline. Santhosh, how familiar are you with Marvel Comics? I mean, I've been throwing 8 years worth of stories at you. What have you... How comfortable do you feel with the terms I'm tossing around?
I feel pretty comfortable. I know that because for instance, in DC, they use a different methodology to get, multiple versions of people around. But the multiverse in Marvel is a little bit closer to what we think about in quantum mechanics and that kind of a thing, that every time a decision is made, a branch point, that a new little multiverse spawns off, and therefore you can have infinite different possibilities, which means there's infinite Dr. Santhoshes and infinite Dr. Joshes out there. But likewise, then, you can have superheroes going back and forth, supervillains going back and forth, and you can have fights going all the way down from street level, which is some of our favorites, like Daredevil, all the way up to consuming the entire multiverse type of fights. So, yeah.
Now, are you familiar, or have you ever heard me talk about the cancerverse?
Is this the multiverse?
No, this is not. This is not, and it's an evil universe. Now, there's a couple.
Wait! Sorry, this is one of the multiverses. A universe.
Yeah, not one touched on in the film, but
Sure.
let's go back to the death of Captain Marvel, who lay
Okay, gotcha.
dying of an untreatable cancer. Well, in a different universe, one that was ruled by the elder god Sithon. Now, for those of you wondering who Sithon is, the temple that Wanda went to in Multiverse of Madness was a temple to Sithon. Think of him as the Cthulhu of the Marvel Universe.
That's what I was going to say. He's kind of a blatant ripoff of the squid-headed dark god Cthulhu.
And the source of all chaos magic from H.P. Lovecraft. As Captain Marvel lay dying of cancer, Sithon from a different universe reached out to him and offered, if they would perform a ritual to allow him essentially a small portal into the world so he could lend his power, he could cure Captain Marvel of cancer.
Oh, pacts with dark gods are never good.
And in this universe, Captain Marvel agreed and performed a ritual with several of his friends, and instantly, now here's the thing.
Okay.
They fulfilled their half of the bargain, and he was cured of his cancer. In fact, the entire world was cured of death. The ritual captured death. Sithon was able to kill it, and with strange eons, even death may die. And once it did, nothing could die, and everything became a warped, kind of cancerous version, just trying to spread the further influence of their lord, this evil god, Cthulhu. Cthulhu.
You almost slipped on that one. But so that's a really interesting concept, and it actually does harken back to something that we worry about as physicians, especially as lifespans get longer and longer. Josh, you and I both know cells only have so many cycles in them. Telomeres shorten, you get mutations and this kind of a thing. And the chances of a malignancy happening or something become cancerous is just a function of time, as well as the other factors,
I cannot tell you how many times my work in palliative care has prevented incursions from the elder gods into our universe. It's a daily struggle.
Is it just? Am I like? He said, "Hi, Dr. Josh," and then you go into a room, and then you close the curtains, and there's low muttering and a pentagram in the ground while you're trying
if your doctor is not discussing pacts with demons with you.
Oh God. This is not true.
Then he is probably not Doctor Strange, the Surgeon Supreme. Which Surgeon Supreme, actually, really interesting run. Sadly, it was canceled at 6 issues. But if you come across it, it's Doctor Strange at least operating as a neurosurgeon again. And in between, fighting demons. And occasionally patients may or may not sit there and kind of ask. But he views disease in a very different way as a sorcerer than just as a physician. A lot of fun. Anyway, that is 2 different ways cancer has affected the Marvel Universe. One, the loss of one of the greatest heroes they had known, and his death stayed permanent for, a long, long time in Marvel Comics.
Oh, really?
His inability to face death, something a palliative care team could have helped him with, led to the complete ending of another universe, and they do occasionally try and invade.
Wow. So that universe, that particular universe, the cancerverse ended like that because of
the cancerverse still exists. Every now and again, they dip back in there for storylines.
That's so creepy. That's so just things just growing, and no death. And so therefore, mutations happen and it's just cancer, and then cancer's on top of cancer. Oh, that's so freaky, Josh. Wait, is this one of the universes then where they got rid of death as in captured death because death is an actual person?
Yes.
Oh, cool.
Let's do at least one more Marvel story.
Okay, all right.
Well, at least one more Marvel Studios character, and then we'll get to a different one.
Okay.
The Hulk. The Hulk famous for being virtually indestructible.
Absolutely. And pelted with gamma radiation, which we've talked about before.
Bullets, bombs, lasers, nothing can pierce the green Goliath's skin, which can be a serious problem, as you may imagine, when it comes to medical treatment.
Yeah. If you need to, actually save his life by, cutting him open or something, your scalpel would just break.
As we've also seen with Luke Cage, who has bulletproof skin. Superhero battles are dangerous, and if a hero like the Hulk is ever gravely injured, what are you going to use to treat him? You can't use a needle, can't use a scalpel. Even a defibrillator may or may not have an effect, which means being invulnerable could be the very thing that ends up killing him.
Sure.
Having Ant-Man explode inside him, I think, as they did in What If.
Stop it! The Ant-Man except so gross.
Well, he exploded his heart, not his lower organs.
Yeah, the sphincter, yes.
But separate from using Ant-Man, in the Incredible Hulk number 365, in a storyline by Peter David and Jeff Purves titled Countdown, Bruce Banner gets poisoned by a scientist who ends up being the brother of a Hulk nemesis. This is not important. Bruce Banner gets poisoned, and the poison continues to affect the Hulk, who begins suffering from multiple heart attacks.
Oh, no. Okay.
Realizing he needed help, Hulk went to look for Reed Richards, who was giving a speech. Unfortunately, Hulk, bursting through the window wall like the Kool-Aid Man, made everybody freak out, so they had to fight a little bit first while he's having multiple heart attacks.
Oh, no, poor guy. Okay. Oh, just as a side note, so possible, cardiotoxic medications, the first one that comes to mind is foxglove or digitalis, which could cause multiple, arrhythmias and subsequent heart attack. Boom, boom, boom.
And probably wouldn't be hard, certainly in a comic book setting, to slip into somebody's drink with some kind of disguise.
Yeah, it doesn't taste of much, really. That's the scary part.
But he was finally knocked out by Ms. Marvel during one of his heart attacks. And then when he was transported to a nearby hospital, he was told the doctors needed a blood sample to figure out what was poisoning him. But because they couldn't pierce his skin or even his gums with their needles.
Or his tongue, nothing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So how do you suppose they got blood? Because you're right. They could test for digoxin if that's what we think was the cause. You can look for a digoxin level.
Okay. So you could try for other mucosa, if you... Maybe his insides aren't completely invulnerable, so you could actually do something like an endoscopy, right? And actually find a blood vessel, near the stomach or something like that, that, you could cannulate. Or, one of the softest portions in anybody's body is under the tongue. You can do a draw to if you're absolutely desperate.
That's a good thought, but in response, Hulk simply asked for a test tube.
Okay.
And hit himself in the face until he got a bloody nose.
What? Okay.
Oh, it gets better.
Not the cleanest sample because you're going to have mucus and stuff in there too, but okay.
Although his healing factor quickly sealed up the wound, Hulk just kept punching himself repeatedly until his nose dripped enough blood for Reed and the other scientists to analyze.
This is... Right, so if the only thing that can hurt the invulnerable thing is another part of the invulnerable thing. Sure. Okay, gotcha.
So in them, he's like, we know you're having heart attacks. We don't know what's poisoning you. Let me just beat myself in the face. Can I stop yet? Nope. Little more. Little more.
Unbelievable. No, Josh, come on. There were so many other ways to get some blood. He seriously just punched himself in the face. That would hurt so much. Oh,
I think it was a very imaginative, creative solution from two writers whose power set could have painted them into a corner.
Sure. Okay. All right. Fair. Fair.
Although it does imply that Ant-Man would be of much greater use in the medical world as a capsule endoscopist than
Yeah.
as a superhero.
Yeah. He would be. Well, what is that show? It's a movie, Josh, where it's a submarine that shrinks down. The Incredible Journey, or the
Magic School Bus.
no, it's not the
Anyway,
Magic School.
moving on.
But yeah, it's been thought of many, many times that if you had some sort of shrinking technology, because human hands are so adept and everything like that, that if you could shrink down the instrument and then just guide it into whatever place you needed to, that would be the coolest technology in the world. Yeah.
Let's move on to our next story.
Mm-hmm. Are we out of the multiverse?
We're going to leave Marvel behind at least for a moment.
Okay, got it.
Other properties deserve some attention too.
Absolutely, yeah.
I have a heart. In fact,
Yeah.
I've got two of them. Two hearts are better than one, right, Santhosh?
No, that's weird. Yeah, I mean, you can say, oh god, Zoidberg. Zoidberg had multiple hearts.
No, Santhosh. Doctor Who.
Oh yeah, who?
Yes.
No. You're taking me into the TARDIS, aren't you? Let me hang out with you.
Yeah, we're gonna head to time and relative dimension and space.
Yeah.
And talk about Doctor Who, who I would have said about 5 minutes prior to this conversation famously is known for his alien physiology of having two hearts.
Yeah. I don't know if they mention any of his other organs throughout the rest of the massive series of Doctor Who, but even non-Whovians do know that Doctor Who, two hearts.
Well, this is something that can in fact happen. It's a real surgical procedure that can take place outside of the Whoniverse. And again, not common, but there's something, when we're talking about heart transplants, there's two different approaches that can be taken. The more common of the two is known as the orthotopic approach. It basically means take out the old heart, put in a new heart.
Yeah, plain and simple. You pinch off all the blood vessels. You usually put them on bypass, right? So the blood is no longer flowing. Take out the old one. You got a little place where you can put the new one. Squeezy, squeezy. Easy peasy.
However, if the orthotopic approach doesn't work, either because of anatomical reasons or lack of good quality donor hearts, then occasionally a heterotopic heart transplantation will be performed. Now, this is also known as a piggyback heart transplantation. And before I take away that adorable mental image.
Sure. Well, I mean, we've done some cool journal clubs lately where it could actually be a piggyback.
It involves taking a healthy donor heart and implanting it on the right side of the recipient's damaged heart. Then both hearts are surgically attached to one another, allowing blood from the damaged heart to flow into the new heart.
Yeah. So you basically are giving a live organic assist. Well, rather than just letting the new heart kind of work on its own, you know, two hearts are better than one.
The new heart can then pump blood around the body and is accomplished by leaving the recipient's heart in place and connecting the donor heart to the right side. Now, it's rare, but it is advantageous because the new heart can still act as an assist device if complications occur. So think about it. Even if, let's say, your heart normally has an ejection fraction of 15%, pretty bad, right?
Yeah. You're not going to be walking more than 5 or 6 steps with that before having to really lay down.
And then you get a donor heart that has an ejection fraction of maybe 40 or 50%, a little bit closer to the normal range. Well, now it's not just 15. It's a bonus 15, and you're working up around 65, the functionality of what we see from a much more normal heart.
Very, very cool. And I've got to say, Christian Bernard, who pioneered this thing in late 1970s, this was really so that you could actually treat acute rejection before we had anti-rejection medications, right? You could still keep that native heart, and then you wouldn't know if that new one came in, would they reject, would they not reject? The new heart would be the healthier one, but you'd get some residual function from the old one in case just rejected and shut down the new heart. So it's still used for some things, Josh. So, if you have severe pulmonary hypertension, which means that your blood vessels feeding your lungs have high blood pressure rather than your peripheral, the blood vessels going out to your arms, legs, and head and everything. So for that, the heterotopic transplant seems to be much better because you said like it goes on the right side, right? So you can
Correct.
feed the right side of the heart with a little bit more flow and get, help it kind of assist and get over that high pressure in the pulmonary arterial circuit. So it still has some uses, but it's not used much anymore because the original purpose, which was to help through rejection, is much better now that we have drugs like cyclosporine and sirolimus and all these kind of things to help us prevent rejection.
Both hearts still rely on one another. It's not like one immediately replaces all of it. They have to work in tandem with a companion. So there you go, folks. Gallifreyans are walking among us.
They totally are. Although they might not be able as easily as you think to travel instantly through space and time.
Or regenerate. Lot more.
Or regenerate. That's the major problem, actually, right there.
Now, yes. One of the things that comes up in a lot of different superhero properties, whether it's Marvel, DC, The Boys.
Okay.
If you had to list, let's say, your top 3 most common superpowers that you tend to see, what would be up there for you? Not necessarily ones that you would want, although I'm open to hearing that too.
Sure.
But what are some of the most, when I tell you, if I say, here's a superhero story, what powers are you just assuming?
So they're usually physical. So super strength, super speed, invulnerability, those are tops up there. And then you do have some people who go more for the kind of mental aspects like telepathy and, the telekinesis and that kind of a thing. So I tend to go more for like Superman is the kind of stock hero, and his biggest things are invulnerability and super strength. And I guess flight along with that is a big one. Everybody wants to fly.
Well, originally he could just leap tall buildings in a single bound. Flight came later.
That's true, yeah. Right, so his flight actually came from his super strength, right, because he just jumped.
But laser vision is a pretty big one too, especially if we're talking about Superman. And it got me thinking, have you ever stared at a computer screen too long? I was about to say, have you ever sat there reading for a really long time and your eyes get tired? And then I realized what century I live in. So have you ever been scrolling your phone or reading
Josh,
a computer?
People still read books. It's okay.
But you know how your eyes fatigue after focusing in one space for that long?
Right. Yeah. So something's way up close, you focus on it, then you try to look far away and everything's blurry.
How do you suppose that would affect somebody with laser vision? That's pretty intense focus. I mean, you are refracting light to the point that it can cut things. It's not just causing a gentle little sunburn on somebody. People are lasering buildings apart. If you are focusing your eyes, what kind of damage do you suppose that's going to do in the short or the long run? Because that's pretty intense focusing to cut a building up.
Yeah, I mean, if you have that kind of laser power, first of all, you need a power source in the eye. I don't know where that's going to fit. And then that energy has to go through a focusing lens. You do have to get stimulated emission of radiation, right? That's what a laser is. Usually that happens by reflecting the light between two mirrors, back and forth until, it forms that single beam and then out through the lens. And then it's got to be powered. But yeah, that kind of focus is very, very sharp in order to focus the beam down small. Now, I don't know, because in some cases with, Superman and stuff, like the beam is quite wide and big. It's not focused. Or one of your favorites is Cyclops. The beam just goes out, so there actually isn't very much focus there anyway. It's very diffuse.
You know what? We'll come back to him in a moment. But
okay, gotcha. Yeah.
When you're talking about these, how would that even work? Aside from the power source, you have muscles in your eye that handle something called accommodation. All right?
Yes.
Accommodation happens with the movement of the lens inside the eye. This movement is controlled by muscles that usually relax to see far away and contract to see anything nearby.
Yeah.
Now,
and
it's separate from...
The idea of this is that Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. This is really because there's a lens suspended, between those two ciliary bodies, right? And so if you have a more rounded lens, right, when just like what you're saying, it's relaxing, then it's easier from light from further away to focus in. Then you stretch it out, and then it flattens, and you're able to focus close up. So it's a really cool biological mechanism, Josh, that we've actually tried to biomimic and steal a lot of the time. It is such a neat little machine.
So this is how the lasers would basically work, how you can make the beam wider or narrower by focusing near or far, kind of like you're trying to look at one of those magic eye pictures, the 3D ones. You relax your eyes and, fight your enemies. Now, even if lasers could be adequately focused without causing permanent damage to accommodation, I would think that the heat generated by continuously firing lasers out of your eyes could be inflammatory or cause burn damage to nearby nerves.
Yeah, I mean, you're trying to, in the case of a Superman, you're I guess writing into the comic that his biology is such that he's invulnerable to his own laser blasts, right? So that his own tissues don't get burned by them. And so he's got diamonds for lenses and that kind of thing. Something where, they wouldn't get burned
all right,
out.
It's a little bit of a cop-out, but I'll grant you, yes, that is certainly, if you change the material the lenses are made of, okay, fine.
Right, but even the strongest ones in the world, Josh, you're absolutely right, are going to get burned out over time, especially if you're pumping that much power through them.
I mean, I guess there's nowhere really safe to fire lasers out of. You definitely wouldn't want to do it from your mouth. You'd have GERD.
Although for me, dragon fire breath, the old school Dungeons and Dragons, if you have a draconic or a half dragon character that has a breath weapon, I always thought that was way cooler.
I bet they taste nothing because they always have burned palates, like when you eat a pizza that's too hot.
That's true. It's just
dragons never enjoy pizza.
Yeah. Oh, that's the title of a book right there. Dragons never enjoy pizza.
So, yeah, where's the safest place? The hands? Just the sheer force. And, that's like firing a gun. You have a kickback, which means there would be an upper limit. There's an upper limit on how much force you can push out of your hands before you start breaking your wrists.
That's what always scared me about, for instance, Iron Man, right? With the repulsor beams that he had. Not his flight, which actually definitely could kill him with whiplash and everything. But if he fired a repulsor that was so strong from his hands, the palms of his hands, and that could actually break down a wall. If he didn't also kick backwards in order to, absorb that shock, if he tried to stand still, that thing would crush his radius and ulna and humerus right into his body.
So there's really no good place to fire lasers out of your body.
No,
It's just
not
not.
out of your body. Yeah.
But I will admit the most realistic depiction of how to
Sure.
safely handle that is Cyclops. Now,
Okay.
before
So
everybody starts getting their spandex in a twist, I'm aware that Cyclops doesn't actually shoot lasers per se, such as his beams come
yeah.
from the Force or the Punch dimension. Um,
When you
but
taught me about this, I couldn't stop laughing. The punch dimension.
when he does keep on his visor, we can treat it as if it is the same as lasers because
Sure.
his visor allows him to basically open and shoot out at whatever. He can have his eyes the most relaxed without getting accommodation injury
Okay.
because he allows the visor he wears in front of him, made of ruby quartz, to then further focus the beam to the narrow level he requires. So he does use corrective lenses. He's the superhero who uses glasses to use his ability properly.
That's fantastic. And I never really thought of it as, actually talking about disability in the context of superheroes, because the first one we always go to is paraplegia, right? With Professor X. But he has essentially a scary disability, and he's using a prosthesis in this case to help accommodate. That is so cool.
The most realistic laser-based superhero I can think of. Now, for those of you who are sitting there worrying because you do scroll through your phone too much, don't worry about it. Actually, all eye strain from overfocusing will resolve with just eye rest. Stop looking at stuff for a while and it will get better.
Yes.
Now, accommodative ability is generally pretty well developed by 4 months of age and starts to work until around age 40. Wait a minute. Oh. But
no.
when the lens begins to become less flexible and harder to move, that's why the majority of us older adults may require reading glasses or bifocals. This insulting journal.
Just recognizing his own mortality as he sits in his microphone.
You know what? For anybody who does have this, and you're not old, like 40.
Yeah. This is like the time we looked at the meme about the Super Bowl and Snoop Dogg and everyone was on there, and both of us were like, oh, finally a modern artist. You forget that all those hits are like 20 to 30 plus years old. Oh,
that makes me so angry, Santhosh, that you know what? I think it's Morbin time.
No!
That's right. You didn't think we were going to let a comic book medicine episode go by without referencing the most talked about film of the year.
Yeah, not in 2022. We would have our podcasting, our science and medicine and entertainment podcasting licenses revoked.
If we didn't go over, that's right, the Morbius sweep is coming to this podcast. Now, you may be asking yourself, you may be asking yourself, home listeners, wait a minute, what could Morbius have to do with medicine? He doesn't possess any of the mystical vulnerabilities that supernatural vampires have. He doesn't care about your garlic, holy water, crucifixes, or silver.
None. Zero.
And then some of you are saying, well, maybe he's like Blade. He has an aversion to sunlight. He's got that photosensitive skin.
Wait, Blade,
but he's not incinerated
Blade's
by
a daywalker, though.
So is Morbius.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
He has been shown to heal from multiple gunshot wounds in under an hour, so he has a healing factor.
The speed and strength and all that kind of like that supernatural stuff, yeah.
He also has, more severe injuries like broken bones or burns can still heal, but it's accelerated by feeding on blood.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, so he can heal up, but if he gets some, sucks some blood down, he heals even faster.
So let's diagnose Morbius. Santhosh, if you had to take a look, because here's the thing. For those of you who didn't see Morbius, which I can't imagine is anyone, really.
Yeah.
But
no, I mean,
just
it was
in
just
case,
one of the most watched, movies of all time.
but just in case.
Yeah, just in case.
Morbius is a brilliant scientist with a unspecified, vague, quote-unquote, blood disease.
Yes. Uh-huh.
He researches the blood and DNA of vampire bats because reasons.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Looking for an answer to his blood disease vampire bat. I think you see where this is going.
Yeah.
Hijinks ensue, and Morbius ends up a pseudo-vampire with a requirement for feeding on blood,
right,
and a questionable moral compass.
Sure.
So there you go. You now know everything you need to. So, Santhosh, what kind of diseases do you think would cover either the blood disease that Morbius had pre-transformation, or would account for his symptoms post-transformation?
Okay, so pre-transformation, we have discussed vampirism and Count Dracula before, so definitely a throwback, but I will put out porphyria as one of the possibilities, where you have trouble with either the construction or the breakdown of hemoglobin, and therefore can become horribly, horribly anemic and likewise weak. And all these things kind of going on. Interestingly, your pee turns purple in one type of porphyria, not all of them. So that's my guess for that one.
Yeah, I'd agree. And we've talked before, usually in our Halloween episodes, about porphyria being a vampire disease. It does make you very sensitive to sunlight to the point where you cannot go out. It often causes receding of your gums, so your teeth can become a little bit blood stained, as well as gums receding, making your teeth look larger, possibly fang-like to the uninitiated. You do have to frequently, if not feed on blood, receive multiple transfusions due to these hemolytic effects.
Yes, and sometimes it can be really quite frequent transfusions, which can not only leave you feeling weak all the time, but you can start hemolyzing the donor blood, right? Because essentially it's a kind of a temporary transplant. And so you can develop antibodies against that and start to destroy that blood. So that's no good.
And because wound healing requires, and on top of that, wound healing requires blood. So feeding on blood really would make you heal faster. Maybe not in hours, but certainly without it, it would take much longer.
Yeah. And this is a genetic disorder. So we talked about it as one of the leading candidates for one of the vampirisms behind the legend of like a Count Dracula, because in a royal line where you had a lot of, intermarriage and crossbreeding, inbreeding, I should say, this would be one of the diseases that could prominently feature in a bloodline of royal descent.
Which is how vampires got associated with nobility. But Morbius is a man of the people. He's a scientist.
He's a man of the people.
He's a Nobel-winning man of the people. Now, here's the thing. You may be like, okay, well, he's definitely still a vampire because he bites people. And, most of his victims die or are severely injured by his bite. You know who else gets severely injured by a bite? Everyone. If you were to walk around biting people, good chance they could die depending on where they're bitten. And unlike supernatural vampires, his victims do not become vampires themselves, at least depending on which storyline you're reading.
Yeah, he doesn't turn any victims. So he's a vampire of one.
Yeah. Now, again, if you want to look at this as some kind of sentient leukemia, as we saw with Captain Marvel, you would treat it as, and that's what's giving him those supernatural abilities, the speed or the strength on top of all the symptoms, then you want to look into irradiating it, right?
Oh, sure. Amongst other things, yes, chemotherapy and radiation are mainstays for treatment of leukemia. Yes.
Well, let's see, I think the Spectacular Spider-Man, the Spectacular Spider-Man number 38, the radioactive blood of Spider-Man once caused Morbius's vampirism to go into remission. This is a thing that happened in the comics.
Oh, gotcha. And we've discussed this before in terms of the Hulk and Spidey. Do they actually still carry around radiation, and are they actually exuding radioactivity, or did they just have irradiated blood and that's it? But I guess in this particular iteration, we're saying that his blood is actually radioactive.
Yep. Well, we've talked about Spider-Man's radioactive blood before and how it once gave somebody cancer, but that is another episode, and I encourage you to listen to our archives to find it. But yeah, so Morbius bit Spider-Man, got irradiated by his blood, only this time it cured his cancer instead of causing it, and sent him into remission. And Morbius became human again, didn't have to feed on blood for quite some time. He then developed a serum based on Spider-Man's blood that would help to hold off his vampiric episodes. So he basically would inoculate himself with this serum-derived vaccine.
Oh, okay.
Look how much science is in Spider-Man.
That's fantastic. I really, really love that, Josh. Holy cow. I'm still trying to figure out how you would call this particular condition that he ended up with as a cancer rather than as a genetic change. That one is still, I'm wrestling with that one a little bit.
Because how is radiation going to cause a vampirism to go into remission? There has to be, in order for something to go into remission, something has to be active within it. And that implies vampirism is not a genetic change. So we're definitely looking at some kind of blood disease, which removes it from the realm of porphyria, but does allow, if it's something circulating within the blood, whether it's an immunoglobulin or an antibody, it is something that can be affected by radiation.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. So we kind of have to kind of sideways, come up with the mechanism of this particular disease. But there it is. And, to be fair, cancer, when it comes up, is a genetic change. There are changes and breakdowns in those particular genes. It's just, not quite the same type of genetic disease that we think about with, if it's a metabolic disease, for instance.
What bothers me is that on-off switch. It's the on-off switch where it comes back immediately and in strength rather than gradually over time, even with rapid division. So, when we're talking about, whenever you talk about Morbius, who does interact frequently with Spider-Man, which is why Sony's trying to get their own universe of spider villains.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that is not the only blood-related superhero who Morbius has crossed paths with. You mentioned before the Hulk, Santhosh.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Well, not so much Bruce Banner, but another upcoming Marvel show, Jennifer Walters' She-Hulk.
Oh, okay, yes. All right, cool.
Michael Morbius, who you might also recall as a doctor.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Dr. Morbius.
If we must,
should I not assume an encyclopedic knowledge of the recent and award-deserving Morbius film? But
no, you're 100% right. I hate the fact that he was a doctor because he did nothing doctorly in that film. Nothing.
Morbius in the comics selflessly saved She-Hulk's life by stabilizing her erratic transformations. She didn't know how to control them like Bruce Banner. And he stabilized her with a serum that he had created to cure the remnants of his own condition. A serum that, if you may recall, was developed from Spider-Man's blood. Allowing her to change forms at will, so she wouldn't always be stuck just as the Jolly Green Giant. As a thank you for helping to stabilize her ability to transform, she defended him in court on a charge of murder. And managed, because She-Hulk is a lawyer superhero, and managed to reduce his conviction to involuntary manslaughter due to his medical condition of vampirism.
Okay. I don't know if I'm in full agreement with that, because that kind of provides, kind of an escape from his responsibility, but I get it. I do understand.
You're right. That is where the believability line is drawn.
No, not that. It's just that if I was, if we were judging the case, like that kind of a thing. Yeah.
Well, if it makes you feel better, let me tell you about one of his supervillains. And in fact, I even sent you a picture. Dr. Thaddeus Payne, who appeared in only, as far as I know, a couple issues, but the first was Morbius the Living Vampire #4 in 1994. He's another physician. Dr. Payne is a sadist who is unable to feel pain and has prosthetic hands equipped with surgical tools. Santhosh, I sent you a picture of him. Why don't you go ahead and describe that to our listening audience? This is our annual bonus supersized episode.
Yeah, absolutely. It's scary to look at. There are you're focusing on one particular panel, but there's two overlapping panels in there, and it's a guy in a very traditional surgeon outfit. So he's got the green scrubs and the little, skull cap on. He even has like the old timey light, like the forehead lamp that you would have. But his hands, Josh, are surgical instruments.
Freddy Krueger style.
Yeah, well, but even more complicated, because he's actually got, like a bone saw and scalpel and a spreader. And he, for some reason, is digging into his left arm with his right surgeon finger to cannulate. I think it looks like he's trying to get access to a vein. And he's saying ordinarily such a trauma would result in severe discomfort, but I'm quite unable to feel pain. I'm guessing that's why his name subsequently is like a pun. Like
his birth name was Dr. Payne, so why, if it ain't broke, why fix it? But I know he's a supervillain and terrifying looking, but I guarantee you, if I include this link in the show notes, several of our surgical friends are going to look at this and salivate, being, do you know how much more time I could get done, or how much more I could get done in the OR if I had those hands?
I'm creeped out by it. I'm not loving it. It's scary. Yeah.
So we had to talk about Morbius, but I think we covered a couple. I think we covered a couple conditions that you may not have realized were actually completely realistic, despite being in the fantastical world of superpowers.
Yeah. So hopefully it'll give you kind of a cooler, look at some of these, that, when you reflect on some of these scenes or some of these movies, you can say that, but that's plausible, or that's interesting, or maybe it should have been this or that, or any one of those things. Yeah.
So I hope you enjoyed our M&M conference. No, not morbidity and mortality, Morbius and mortality.
Yeah.
In our giant size annual #8 comic book medicine.
Woo!
I have to get back to the con, so that's it for this week. As always, we love to hear your comments, questions, and concerns. If you'd like to support us spiritually, emotionally, or financially, links to do that are in the show notes, along with links for further reading and occasional comic pages.
Mm-hmm.
The show is produced by me with a lot of help from Dr. Santhosh and friends. Our theme music is composed by Rachel Leisure. And until next time, get your shot, wear a mask, practice good hygiene, pick up a book, preferably a comic one this week. Find a country that's open and safe, and when you've done all those things, happy travels.
Bye, everybody.